Here. Here. Okay, thank you. Tonight we'll continue our public hearing on the Mainstream Renewable Power Petition number 12-P-1483, known as Green River Wind Farm Phase 1 application for the Ag 1 special use permits to construct the wind turbine generator in Lee County as part of the wind energy conversion system. And so at this point we will turn over to our moderator, Judge Slater.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Welcome, and again, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I know I've repeated this often, but I will, at the beginning of every session, do the same. Because some people have been here before, but some have not. My name is Tim Slavin. I'm a retired judge engaged as an independent contractor to what is called facilitate this hearing. I have no adjudicatory responsibilities. I am not for or against any particular position. I am a neutral. I am here hopefully to add some organizational efficiency and flow to these proceedings. This is, as the chairman said, indeed Green River Wind Farm Phase 1 LLC's application for 46 special use permits as a part of a wind energy conversion system, commonly known by the acronym WEX. As shown by certificates of publication, notice of this hearing was published in the Dixon Telegraph on June 18, 2012. Notices to adjoining property owners have been given. All who so desire will absolutely be given an opportunity to be heard, but for everyone's benefit, I want to do it as orderly and as efficiently as possible. There are many possible reasons for anyone's presence here this evening. You could be 1, a member of the public as a citizen and spectator, 2, part of the applicant's contingent, or 3, an interested party. In this context, an interested party does not necessarily mean someone who is absolutely for or against the requested special uses, but someone who wants to be heard. If you do want to be heard, you will fall into any one or more of 3 categories. First, you want to give testimony. This means you desire, under oath, to recite facts, to testify to facts relevant to the board's eventual decision. Such is not the time to describe your feelings or announce your opinion, but to aver facts, and you are subject to cross-examination in doing so. Everyone so wishing to testify will be put under oath and given one opportunity to do so. You could be someone you want to be able to cross-examine witnesses. But please, this is just to ask questions of a particular witness, not to argue with him or her. Everyone so wishing to cross-examine will be given one opportunity to cross-examine each and every witness. Or third, you want to make a closing statement. This would be the opportunity to tell the board how you feel or give them your opinion based on facts adduced during the whole hearing process as to what their decision should be. Everyone so wishing to give a closing statement will be given one opportunity to do so. Again, everyone will absolutely have a chance to be heard. However, in order to try and add some semblance of organization, there are 3 half sheets that were available to sign up to participate. One indicating your wish to testify, another your wish to cross-examine witnesses, and the last indicating your desire to give a closing statement. These were available at the door and continue to be available from Alice Henkel. While signing up is not a prerequisite to testifying, cross-examining, or making a closing statement, I will initially be calling on folks using those sign-up sheets. Only after exhausting that list will I invite others to testify, to cross-examine, or to give a closing statement. If you signed up on one of those sheets and it has already been collected, you will not have to sign up again at each continued session. I will keep those half sheets current, hopefully, throughout the proceeding. Written communications are sent in advance of this hearing, or any written material intended as something for the board to consider throughout the hearing is subject to Board Rule Article 5, Section 12, that 8 copies be provided. Any communications received that did not comply with this requirement may not be considered by the board. Those communications received which conformed are marked presently as Exhibits 1 through 12. Each board member has a copy, and another copy is made of a part of the record in this matter. I will now review the chronological progress of the hearing. First, the applicant or his agent may make opening remarks. The applicant presents witnesses one document at a time. I will place each witness under oath or affirmation. After each witness, the commission first and then interested parties have the opportunity to cross-examine. And please, I remind everyone again, this is only the time for questions directed to the witness testifying. Next, interested parties present evidence, one witness or document at a time, and I will place each one of those witnesses under oath. After each interested party witness, the commission and/or applicant have the opportunity to cross-examine that witness. Then, rebuttal witnesses or documents may be presented by the applicant one at a time. Following that, commission or interested party members may cross-examine the applicant's rebuttal witnesses. Finally, surrebuttal witnesses or documents are presented by interested parties one at a time. And the commission and/or interested parties cross-examine those surrebuttal witnesses. Finally, the applicant is given an opportunity for closing remarks, and interested parties are similarly given an opportunity for closing remarks. Some sub-rules. As you may have heard at the last session, each session has a time limit under the zoning board's rules of 2.5 hours. However, we certainly don't want to cut off anybody right in the middle of something, so I will certainly let someone finish a particular stage when the time limit has been reached. Or, if there is very little time remaining at the end of a stage, I may simply suggest to the chair to continue the session rather than starting on another stage. I also have the discretion to call for short recesses, which we've not done so yet and may do so. Under the board's rules, I have the duty to rule on the admissibility of evidence. While the strict judicial rules of evidence do not apply, I will exercise some equitable control of what is being presented, with or without an objection. We do have a court reporter here this evening taking down what is said during the proceedings. I ask all to please be mindful of her job. She cannot take down two people talking at once. She cannot take down nodding heads or gestures. And I'm sure that she's very skilled. There is a limit to how fast a person, including myself, can talk and expect her to keep up. I do ask, please, for civility and decorum. This is certainly a public forum, but please be respectful of all who consider it important enough to be here. I ask all to refrain from displays of approval or disapproval, and as now with all public hearings, I ask you to turn your cell phones off or at least put them on silent. At the last session, a few weeks ago, I believe we had Mr. Crowley on the witness stand, and he was being cross-examined. Mr. Crowley, there used to be a rule in courts around here called the Slavin Rule that if it was a different day you were put under oath. I recognize you were under oath before. You solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. A number of interested parties are represented, mainly by Mr. Porter, but he's being subbing for him tonight is Ms. Dana Millman. Ms. Millman, Mr. Porter finished his cross-examination of this witness, so I will now proceed to interested parties. Those who signed up to ask questions. If you don't have any questions, that's fine. Just say out loud that you don't have any questions. Pat Scully. Pat Scully? No. Robin Ackerson? Robin, okay? And Ms. Ackerson, if you want to use the podium, that's fine. If you want to sit at the table, that's fine. Either one. And folks, as I go through these names, if I mispronounce names, I really apologize. Some of your handwriting is as bad as mine. Some of the names I'm just not familiar with.
Here?
You can either have a seat at the table or at the podium. Yes, I will. I'm sorry. Robin Ackerson. If I misspelled it, please tell me. Ackerson.
Correct.
Okay.
My first question, you said that you assessed, is what you're calling it, the properties. Now, did you assess the properties that they are proposing putting the wind farm in?
I did not assess any properties. My analysis was simply one of reviewing information provided to me by others. My mention of assessment had to do with the fact that I
state that the property involved was Ag 1, which basically cornfields are cornfields and
That's
their
not
value.
what he can only answer one question at once.
Okay. Let's see if I can figure out how to ask it then.
Well, you asked a question, but then you kept going, so.
Oh. You said that what you were assessing was Ag 1.
Is that correct?
Is that correct?
Well, once again, clarification, I did not assess any properties. The term assessment is rather specific toward the function of a county or township assessor. I did not perform that function. However, I did observe that the entire area within the wind farm was zoned Ag 1. If that answers your question.
What exactly was your function in this proceeding that you were testifying to? Because what was your function?
The scope of my assignment was to develop a series of information, first of all, determining the highest and best use of the area in which the proposed towers are to be situated, and secondly, to analyze the effects of wind farms on existing properties in other areas where these wind farms currently exist.
So what was the best use then that you came up with?
The highest and best use of the properties on which the towers are to be installed is agricultural.
Cornfields, right?
Well, there are other factors that fit within agricultural classification under the zoning ordinance.
So were there any homes in these areas?
Yes,
Are the homes being lived in
to the best of my knowledge, most of them were.
by people,
Yes,
families?
I assume so.
Okay, so wouldn't the function also be residential?
No, once again, the scope of my analysis was just as I indicated. I'm not sure what your question is, I guess.
Wouldn't the function also be a home if there are homes in these areas and not just agricultural land?
The function of what? Are you talking about the
The land that's being proposed also has homes, correct?
That's correct.
But you only looked at the farmland in your assessment.
That's not a question, that's a statement.
Okay, so did you look at the homes?
Yes, in fact, I indicated in my testimony last time the number of houses that I observed as I drove through the entire footprint of the proposed wind farm.
And how many homes were there?
There were 70 residential sites, residential properties, if you will, 59 of which I classified as farmstead residences, those that had auxiliary agricultural buildings in connection with them. And the other 11 were, in effect, freestanding residential properties that did not contain any agricultural buildings.
So when you say the functionability of these lands that are being proposed being agriculture, that's not the whole functionability of this land, is it?
I'm not sure I understand the term functionability.
Well, you used the term functionability.
I don't recall ever having used that term, but
Wasn't it what was the best use?
highest and best use.
That's what it was, yeah. So you're stating that the highest and best use is agriculture, but yet there's how many homes? Residential homes?
70.
So wouldn't you then have to classify it as also being best use for residential area?
Well, residential properties are an allowable use under the agricultural zoning classification.
Allowable? What does that mean? I don't understand that.
That means that single-family residences are allowed to exist in an agricultural zoning district.
So then classifying it as only as agriculture in your function in this thing here isn't necessarily a true fact, is it then? Is only stating about
That's two questions.
Sorry. Why then are you only looking at the farmland, the agricultural part of this area, and not taking into consideration the homes, the residences?
as I indicated, I did take into consideration those 70 residences that were situated within this area.
But you're not considering them as being the best use in your assessment.
The term highest and best use has a rather long and complex definition, and I think we perhaps are talking apples and oranges. In the appraisal process, the highest and best use is that use which is legal, physically possible, financially feasible, and which returns maximum benefit to the land. That's the classic definition of highest and best use. In order for a use to exist as a highest and best use, it first of all must be a legal use. And in this particular area, the entire area was zoned Ag 1, so the only legal use in this area would be an Ag 1 use, which does allow for something other than cornfields.
So why didn't you take that into consideration in your assessment, the homes?
It may sound like I'm being critical. The term assessment doesn't really refer to anything I did. My classification of highest and best use is based on what the legal definition of highest and best use is and what the zoning classification of that area is.
Isn't Ag 1 also residential? Isn't that how it's zoned?
Residential uses are allowable in an Ag 1 district.
And there's 70 homes in that area.
70 homes in the area that I drove through, that's correct.
Is that the entire footprint that is being proposed?
It is.
And what is the percentage you would say that people actually live in those homes? Didn't you have a number for that too?
I do not. I couldn't tell by driving by if anyone lived in the property or not. With very few exceptions, they all looked like they were lived in.
But yet you didn't consider residential being a use, a high and probable use, however you say that.
I considered residential properties to be allowable uses within the Ag 1 district.
Well,
Thank you. Yes.
Marilyn Henry? Okay, thank you. Catherine Geither? How'd I do? Okay. That would be Catherine with a K. Geither, G-U-I-T-H-E-R?
Yes.
Okay.
Mr. Crowley, as you were doing that, determining about the effects on residential homes, have you personally ever gone into a home that has been surrounded by windmills to see what it sounds like in that home?
I have.
And have you been in an older home that does not have modern insulation?
I don't recall that I was in an older home. I do recall specifically visiting two houses that were probably considered newer, at least mid-century, or newer. Mid-century being 1950s or newer.
Okay. But nothing that was previous to the 1950s?
I don't recall ever having been one.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Kendall Geither?
Nothing at this time.
Thank you. Giles Calvecto?
Eldridge. He's not here today, Your Honor.
Would you tell me how to spell it? As long as you seem to know who it is.
Eldridge?
Calvo, oh, I see. That's a G. I understand. Thank you. Rich Boris? Rich, as in Boris, B-O-R-I-S?
Correct. You want to discuss?
No, she's fine.
Okay. Mr. Crowley.
Mr. Boris, we can do it. Everyone a favor, pull the mic a little closer to you.
Thank
They're real sensitive. They're not bad. You don't have to turn it on. It's on.
Okay. Mr. Crowley, have you previously authored or co-authored an appraisal report relating to wind turbines other than the Green River project?
Yes.
Would you comment where that was?
In Bureau County, in White Whiteside County, in Lee County, in Livingston County, in Iroquois County, in Kankakee County, in Woodford County, at least those, the rest of the state.
Okay. Does the state and/or National Appraisers Association have a code of ethics for members of the association?
Yes, I do.
Is it your opinion that the code of ethics was adhered to by your report?
Yes, it was.
What is the name of the Appraisers Associations with the code of ethics?
Well, the basic code of ethics is a function of uniform standards of professional appraisal practice, which is a quasi-government organization administered by the various states. In addition to which, I belong, I'm a designated member of the American Institute of Real Estate Appraisers, which has ethics and standards that go slightly beyond those that the USPAP requires.
Okay. Were you aware that in neighboring DeKalb County, there was a group of landowners that filed a lawsuit against the wind developer? DeKalb County and the landowners were leasing their land for the site of the wind turbines, and there was a recent settlement agreement.
I'm not aware of the settlement agreement. I was aware that there had been a lawsuit.
Okay. Does such an out-of-court settlement suggest that there may be indeed some adverse effects of wind turbines?
That's an improper question, sir.
Okay.
Out-of-court settlements are motivated by all sorts of things, and he's not competent to testify what motivated anyone.
Okay. In your appraiser's experience, have your duties in the past related to land leases, including consulting on written lease conditions?
I'm sorry, could you ask that again?
Sure. In your appraiser's experience, have your duties related to land leases, including consulting on written lease conditions?
I can't understand that question either, sir. That's a difficult one.
Let me see if I can reword it. Have you dealt as a consultant with dealing with land leases for any purposes?
Yes.
And does that include the written contract terms?
It depends on at which stage of the negotiations I enter the process. Of course, if I enter it after the agreement has been made, it certainly would include a written agreement.
I understand. Have you read the lease between Mainstream Greenwood River LLC and the farmer/property owners?
I have not.
Okay. Given that any lease may contain harsh terms that go with the land, could such terms affect future land values?
Well, first of all, the scope of my analysis had nothing to do with the lease negotiations between the developer and the property owners. Your question is a very general one. Anything within an agreement of that nature would have a potential of affecting value one way or another.
In your testimony, you indicated you were provided some information from Mainstream that there would be 57 or 58 turbines, but the application apparently now only indicates 46, I believe. Is there anything, you have an explanation for the variance?
Well, first of all, I misunderstood the 46 number. I heard that in earlier testimony that night. The reference was to the number of parcels involved, not the number of towers.
Okay.
So to clarify that, I said that there were 46 towers, but what I meant was there were 46 properties involved. According to my latest information, there will be 53 towers involved in this application.
When you drove around to look at the proposed sites for the wind turbines, were you provided a map of proposed turbine locations?
Yes.
In your experience for public hearings, are maps of the area involved with land use changes typically displayed at public hearings for the benefit of decision makers?
Improper question.
John Martin, it was made known that this LLC does not have any operating wind farms in the United States. If you had this knowledge before your report was completed, would you have sought out other sources for wind turbine effects?
No.
Are you aware that wind is generally stronger during the nighttime hours, and therefore wind turbines would more typically make less noise during daytime hours?
I'm aware that wind velocity tends to vary over a 24-hour period.
Other than wind turbines, other than for wind turbines, are you aware of any other legally required setbacks that are based on the distance from the foundation to a non-participating landowner rather than the property line?
I'm not aware of any.
In your professional opinion, would a setback legally required that protrudes into the land of a non-participating landowner diminish the value of the landowner's property because it would limit future uses of the property?
I don't understand how a setback would protrude.
If the required setback, for example, is 1,400 feet, and hundreds of feet can be within another property owner's property up to their foundation of their house, the setback is protruding onto a non-participating property owner's land.
You're telling them things again. I think I understand your question, but why don't you try and rephrase it?
Okay. Well, if the illegal setback protrudes on somebody else's land, does that diminish the value of that person's land who has not signed up for a wind turbine?
No, that's the purpose of setbacks.
Setback, though, should be from property lines, as all other zoning requirements, if I understand it.
You're telling them things again.
Yeah, okay.
It's difficult, I understand.
Hypothetically, given two equal parcels of land, one with wind turbines on an adjacent parcel with wind turbines as close to the property line as legally allowed, and one with no current or future turbines projected, which parcel would an informed consumer purchase?
Individual consumers, of course, have individual reasons for buying or selling real estate. As a result of my analysis, I found no evidence, no indication that the existence of wind-generating towers in relative proximity to a property adversely affected its value.
Are current and future property taxes a consideration in some or all appraisal reports?
They're usually indicated in most appraisal reports. Whether or not they're a consideration depends on the circumstances.
Have you done any assessment of the effect of wind turbines on property taxes and their effect on future land values?
Once again, it may sound like I'm a broken record. Clarifying the term assessment, I'm not an assessor. In the appraisal process, we consider all factors, including the real estate taxes. But I'm not sure if that's an answer to your question.
No. If a wind turbine project were to go belly up or cease and desist for whatever reasons, for all the increased tax assessment that was taxed for those who assessed for the new property, that tax assessment would then fall on the other taxpayers within the county. Is that correct?
I've not seen a wind project go belly up, so I don't know what would happen.
All right, sir, we're not going to have that, all right? That's how a hearing deteriorates. I'm here to help control the hearing. Please, let's not do that. I'm sorry, you answered the question. Did he answer the question?
No. I'll move on to another question. If the net, let's see. If there is any increase in the value of wind turbines and the net depreciation exceeds that, then what, as the tax levies have increased for the new property from wind turbines, that amount that's no longer available to be taxed will then be shifted on other taxpayers.
I don't know, Dick, I won't get on the scope of it directly, it's certainly not intending Mr. Crowley as an expert.
I'm not sure about that, but it still isn't a question. That was a statement.
Okay. You understand that will be shifted to other taxpayers as the EAV of wind turbines increases.
My understanding as a layman regarding the taxation issue is that the depreciation is determined by an agreement that was entered into with the state of Illinois Department of whatever, and I'm not really certain how that works. It's certainly beyond the scope of my analysis.
Okay, that's all the questions I have.
Thank you, sir. Marie Summer.
No questions at this time.
Thank you. Bob Logan.
Yes, sir.
Good evening, Mr. Crowley. When we were last together, did you testify you were appearing as an expert witness, paid the sum of $10,000 for use of your study in 3 counties, and $500 for each half day you appear as a witness for Mainstream Renewable Power?
Yes,
Did you also testify that you've presented this study with revisions about 12 times over the last 10 years?
that sounds about right, yes.
Are the fees you are being paid for the use of your report and appearance as a witness approximately what you have been paid for past presentations concerning these matters?
Yes.
How much would you say this report with revisions has made you altogether?
This particular report,
Well, this one with revisions. The report, you basically said you used the same revisions, or the same report with revision.
well, it's not really the same report with revisions. The report is updated each time. I would have no idea as to my total billings over a 10-year period.
All right, thank you. Do you agree an expert witness must have a commanding knowledge of all relevant aspects of the issues concerning the testimony he's giving?
That's not a proper question at this point.
All right, that's wrong.
That's up to the fact finder to decide what expert
All right.
credentials they need.
I don't feel bad at all that you tell me that, and if I ask another one like it, it'll be because of my
Fine.
ignorance.
That's what we're all.
Are you being paid to testify the introduction of the proposed Green River Wind Farm's 80-plus industrial wind turbines will have no negative impact on property values in the footprint and in close proximity to the wind farm?
I am paid for my analysis. The opinions within my analysis are not for sale. They are strictly mine and are not covered by any compensation.
At the conclusion of the cover letter of your report, you cited 3 recent studies that support your conclusions. Is that correct?
Yes.
Did you cite the December 2009 Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory study authored by Ben Hohen and Ryan Weiser, and I think there were a couple of other minor authors, as one of your support studies?
Not really one of my support studies. I indicated those studies at the end of my analysis to indicate that my conclusions were consistent with theirs.
All right.
My conclusions had already been reached.
All right. Did you know when Ben Hohen found out about the study, how the study was being used, he responded as early as April 12th of 2010 I think homes that are very close, there's just too much unknown right now. I think one of the things that often happens is that when developers put our report forward and say, look, property values aren't affected, and that's not what we would say specifically.
I'm not familiar with that specific quotation, but I've known Mr. Homan for quite some time. And I did attend a hearing in another county in which one of the co-authors of that report testified on behalf of the developer to that very statement, that it did not negatively affect property values.
Are you acquainted with the Center for Renewable Energy at Illinois State University in Norman, Illinois, directed by Dr. David Lewis?
I'm familiar with it, yes.
Do you know one of the primary purposes of the Center for Renewable Energy is to produce studies and documents that promote renewable energy?
That's not my understanding.
No comment.
So that's the thing with asking questions. You ask a question, you get the answer.
Sure. Weren't the two other reports you cited authored by Dr. Lewis's students, Jason Carter and Linda Hinman, and published by the Center for Renewable Energy?
Yes.
Did you know that Mainstream Power is a major sponsor of CRE programs and conferences, and as such has access to the promotional services of the center?
I'm not familiar with that, but if you say it's, I understand.
You stated that you were aware of studies that contradict your opinion. Is that correct?
Yes.
Did you also state that you rejected the use of those studies, such as Michael McCann's, in your reports because they did not concur with your conclusions?
I did not include those with my report because I used as I indicated at the end of my conclusion, I indicated that there were a couple of studies that were consistent with mine. I'm familiar with a couple of the studies that were not consistent with mine. Did not use them because I had some concerns about their applicability.
Did you say that your survey was conducted over 4 states with special emphasis on Illinois and included Wisconsin, Iowa, and Minnesota?
Yes, that's correct.
How many assessors and appraisers did you said it, but I've forgotten. How many assessors and appraisers did you survey?
It's in my report. I can refer to it if you wish.
I'm sorry, I overlooked it. The number 57 comes to my mind. Is that almost correct?
No, I believe it was greater than that. I think I may have used that number in one of the previous hearings, but after I reviewed my data, I think it was greater than that. I found it was in my report.
Sir, for the purpose of this, my questioning, if it was 57 or if it was 90, my next question will answer, or it won't really matter whether it was 57 or 90.
It's somewhere between those two numbers.
Okay, but you had stated that to a person, they all agreed that there would be no impact. Is that correct?
That's correct.
When did you visit the East Grove and Hamilton Township area?
Maybe a year and a half ago.
Okay.
No, I'm sorry. Earlier this year.
Earlier this year?
This year.
Do you know approximately when?
I believe in March.
Did anyone accompany you on that travel?
My wife.
The reason I ask is several times you have said we, and I wondered, if anybody did. Did anybody assist you with determining what structures were located in the two townships?
Those were based on my own observations.
In your testimony, you mentioned a MET tower or an MET tower, whatever that is. Do you today know what
That's
that's
a meteorological testing tower.
All right, you didn't appear to know it the last time.
All right, let's not have
Sure.
side comments, please. That's how things deteriorate.
You say in your letter that the results are applicable to any commercial wind turbine model and number of turbines within the general project area. Would you want to qualify that statement in any manner?
Well, we talked last time about the 512-foot height as being the maximum. Of those that I was given information about, the heights range from the upper 420s up to that 512 feet.
What commercial uses did you identify in your travels?
There were a couple of what I consider agricultural commercial uses. I don't recall the specifics in this case, but I think at least one of them looked to be a chicken feeding operation.
Did you encounter any historic or tourist sites?
I encountered a former church, but it was not an older church. It was a recently constructed church that apparently is now being used for some other purpose. As far as historical sites at the edges of the wind farm, there are two primitive parkland type areas.
Did you travel through the Green River wildlife area?
I did not. They were not within the wind farm footprint.
Isn't a study conducted by Wisconsin-based, are you familiar with the Wisconsin-based Appraisal Group 1 study of surveys, surveying real estate people? Are you familiar with that?
I'm familiar with that study.
It seems that they used a methodology similar to yours, but instead of surveying only appraisers and assessors, they used agents and brokers. Is that correct?
Not only is that correct, but as I indicated, I believe in my earlier testimony, there is a specific reason why I chose assessors and appraisers, because both of those professions are concerned with and are trained to recognize value, whereas real estate salespersons or brokers are being trained to buy and sell real estate, and I think it's a whole different ballgame.
Do you have any recollection of what the report revealed?
In the survey method, the questions from the appraiser who conducted the report were to brokers and salespeople who were not familiar with wind farm developments. And the questions were to the extent that if there was such a thing, what do you think would happen? And the results of that survey are based on the answers given to these very hypothetical questions. My questions, on the other hand, to the professionals with whom I dealt, were specific as to what their experience had been with existing wind farms.
Have your conclusions changed in any material way since you first conducted this survey in 2002?
No. I'm still looking for evidence that there is value to the mission. I've not found it.
Do you also contend that the introduction of the industrial turbines will not increase the time needed and possibly even make it impossible for a person to sell their home?
Person to let their home?
To sell it, it would increase the time. Are you saying that it wouldn't increase the time needed and possibly even make it impossible to sell it?
I'm not familiar with any studies that would indicate that.
When circumstances cause an assessor to consider, or what circumstances cause an assessor to consider lowering tax assessments for a parcel?
When the value has decreased.
In your letter, didn't you state that agricultural real estate has not seen the decline in sales prices as have other types of real estate?
That's correct.
By what percentage would you say the residential real estate market has lost value since 2007?
It varies, of course, from area to area. If I were to draw an average over our whole market area, which would be 8 or 10 counties locally, It would probably average about 30%.
By what percentage would you say the commercial real estate market has lost value since 2007?
Somewhat more than that.
Would you be surprised to find out that the assessors have not reduced those properties either, or the properties in our area?
That would be up to the assessor.
I mean, would it surprise you to find out that even though there were 30% and more than that in commercial, that they haven't reduced assessments?
Typically, the way it works with lowering assessments is that the individual taxpayer would have to make an application to the supervisor of assessments in order to get the assessment reduced. It's my understanding, in talking with the Lee County supervisor of assessments, that she has in fact lowered the assessed valuation of a number of properties when the taxpayer makes application to do so.
You also, do they require an application to raise the assessment?
I don't believe so. I think they can do that.
I should. Okay, I just wonder. I don't either. How would
Mr.
you
Logan, let's refrain from the editorial comments, please.
Yes, sir. How would you rate your knowledge of the equipment, functions, maintenance, operations, and the output of the industrial wind turbines being used today?
My expertise excludes these kinds of specifics of a mechanical nature.
How are turbines different today than they were in 2002 when you first began presenting your opinion survey?
For the most part, they're larger.
Do you have any idea what determines how much noise the wind turbines can emit upon receptor property?
I believe that's a technical issue for which I'm
Beyond
not
you.
qualified.
Do you understand that sound emissions are to be measured from the property line rather than the foundation?
I think we're getting into an area, Mr. Logan, I don't want to interject too much, but let's not start asking him a lot of technical questions.
I felt, sir, that would be a common question that might be...
Go ahead, I'm just cautioning.
Sure. I don't want, I'm not going to ask him the...
Go ahead and ask again.
My question would be, according to the standards, are not the effects to be, the sound effects to be measured from the property line rather than the foundation?
That, once again, is beyond my expertise. I believe that there are experts that might be able to testify to that.
Would it have an impact on value if they were measured from the foundation and found to be louder than they were at the property line?
I don't think so. I'm trying to recreate a scenario and I can't.
Do you know who has the burden of responsibility for the enforcement of the provisions of the Illinois Pollution Control Board?
I do not.
Do the Illinois Pollution Control Board standards make special allowances for wind turbines to emit noise pollution on receptor property?
I'm going to interject here. We're getting pretty far here with him. This is an expert in value, not in pollution control board standards, not in technical.
Okay, I'll skip on. I just believe that those have an impact on property value. And so I asked the question.
I understand your understanding, and maybe there wouldn't be too many people quibble with that, but asking him about how the pollution control board does or doesn't do something,
Okay.
or how a wind turbine emits noise and what is beyond his expertise. This is not a fact witness. We call this an opinion. He's given opinions on value.
Okay. How many turbines and in what proximity to a non-participating home does it take to begin to see a decline in property value?
Having not seen the decline in property values, I don't know.
In all the assumptions you make concerning compliance are not met, if they're not met, would such changed conditions magnify the impacts and render your opinion possibly invalid concerning property value?
I don't know.
I'm just going to ask you, but I think I probably know the answer. How would you describe your knowledge of health issues associated with wind turbines, including epidemiology and acoustics?
I am a real estate appraiser and I am not a medical person.
Okay. Are you at all familiar with the construction and operational characteristics of industrial wind turbines?
I am a real estate appraiser, and I'm not a mechanical engineer.
Is it true that the wind towers being proposed for the Green River Wind Farm are nearly twice as tall and have a rated output nearly twice as large as the wind turbines erected in 2002 when you first prepared your survey?
I'm not familiar with the exact difference. They are certainly larger.
Do appraisers attach disclaimers to their appraisals and market studies to ensure that they're not held liable for their mistakes?
We, perhaps to a certain extent, do. We do have a list of limiting conditions in all of our reports.
Did you say on several occasions you accept assumptions based on information mainstream provides you, believing a check or verification is unnecessary for you to then turn around and report those assumptions?
I believe I said I relied upon information provided to me by them. I did not follow up with your wording of that.
Okay. Am I correct in saying that you stated that your market analysis determined that agriculture was the best use of land in and around the footprint of the Green River Wind Farm?
Yes, the highest and best use.
Did you retract your statement that best land use was established as a primary consideration by zoning boards in making conditional special use land decisions?
I indicated that the legality of use is the first test for the determination of the highest and best use.
If Mainstream sells the project before it is built or before operational problems become apparent, the resulting issues will not be of concern to you or to them, right?
It's beyond the scope of my analysis.
Do you know?
Just do me a favor, just slow down a little bit for reporters.
Sure.
Understanding we all get in a hurry to talk.
Also, I'm overlooking questions that you...
I understand.
You mentioned personal knowledge of the Crescent Ridge number 1 wind farm. Are you aware that after construction, mud had to be pumped under several of the turbines because they were tilting and in danger of tipping over?
I'm aware that they had problems with the turbines here.
Are you aware that a number of the turbines planned for the Green River floodplain area?
Slow down.
Sorry. Are you aware that a number of the turbines planned for the Green River floodplain area are proposed to be built on sand that has no foundational bedrock under it?
Much of the soil content within this part of the county is very sandy soil. I don't know the specific soil borings for each and every one of the towers.
Have you ever visited a family residence that was experiencing shadow flicker or the sound impact of turbines such as proposed for this wind farm?
Yes.
Have you ever developed an appraisal of residential property located adjacent to or near a wind turbine?
I have not, but my office has. Other appraisers in my office have.
Did any of those appraisers as assessors you surveyed present an opinion that varied from your stated conclusions at all?
No.
Does a decrease in the number of people interested in a parcel have a tendency to lower the asking price for a real estate parcel?
Perhaps.
You said in earlier testimony the media and the internet provided you with information about negatives from complainers and that the developers and those with turbines or agreements weren't complaining. Is that correct?
I'm sorry, I did not understand that.
Okay. You said in earlier testimony the media and the internet provided you with information about negatives from complainers and that the developers and those with turbines or agreements weren't complaining. Is that correct?
Well, certainly. Obviously, the developers aren't going to complain about themselves.
You already answered that. Do you know the confidentiality agreements, participants in those signing other good neighbor agreements are forbidden under contract to speak negatively of the impacts under most circumstances?
I'm sorry, once again,
You're going awful fast. Awful fast.
I'm sorry, I don't mean
It
to.
was just hard, I know you know, it was just hard to follow that.
Okay, do you know that the confidentiality agreements, participants that those signing other good neighbor agreements are forbidden under contract to speak negatively of the impacts under most circumstances?
I do not know the content of those agreements.
Have you seen any shift in public attitude toward wind farms in close proximity to residential properties during the decade you have been presenting your study?
No.
Would it surprise you to know that when speaking candidly, proponents, even executives of wind energy, have said wind turbines do not make good neighbors?
I have no knowledge of that.
How do fewer interested buyers, longer sales times, and perceived negatives affect the price of a real estate parcel?
They could perhaps have an effect.
Do you know what the acronym NIMBY stands for?
Certainly.
What does that stand for?
Not in my backyard.
Not in my backyard. Does the rise in the number of NIMBYs reduce the number of potential buyers for a property?
One of the things that I addressed in my analysis was that very fact, that in the early stages of development, that can be a measurable factor, but it does tend to dissipate in time.
You stated that agricultural usage was the best use of parcels within the footprint of the Green River Wind Farm. Is that correct?
The highest and best use.
Highest and best use. My intent is not to use any word out there.
It's a very technical term, but I just want to make it clear.
All right. Is it also your opinion that the introduction of wind turbines does not negatively impact the value of farmland on which turbines are constructed and adjacent farmland?
Actually, to the contrary.
Is agricultural land appraised in regard to its ability to produce crops?
It's appraised in a number of different ways, one of which is by its ability to produce income.
Do you know that the Illinois Farm Bureau and the Center for Renewable Energy identify severe impaction, broken tiles, interference with irrigation, crop damage, damage to the water table, access roads, cultivation access, erosion, depletion of the bat population, impact on aerial pest control and fertilizing, and additional heat directed downward as potential problems associated with the introduction of industrial wind turbines?
I'm familiar with some of those concepts.
Might any of all of these impact crop yields on farmland?
Perhaps temporarily, certainly.
If the impacts reduce production, would the lost production be reflected in lower land values, especially for non-participating landowners?
I'm not sure how these conditions you mentioned would affect the non-participating farmland owner.
Would it impact the productivity of a man's land if he could not spray aerially or herbicides or insecticides?
I've seen instances where aerial appliers have indicated that they can, in fact, under certain circumstances, continue to apply in wind farm areas.
When you traversed the roads of the footprint of proposed Green River Wind Farm, did you catalog each of the parcels proposed to receive a turbine and tower and all those parcels near those parcels to determine current agricultural usage?
I indicated that I found 70 residential properties, some of which were on the sites where the turbines are proposed, some of which were not.
Did you inventory the type of crops being grown on those parcels?
I did not.
Was there any evidence of irrigation being utilized?
Yes,
Significant or otherwise?
moderate.
Did you make record of the parcels that may have animals of husbandry located on them, such as horses, cows, goats, or chickens?
I did not make specific reference to that.
Does your study reflect any potential loss of income to neighboring farmers due to decreased crop or livestock production?
I found no evidence of that.
Do you know that industrial wind turbines are not are not recognized as an agricultural use and are not protected at the state level by the Farm Noise Nuisance Act?
I believe that Lee County has recognized that wind turbines are an allowable use under special use permits in agricultural zone areas.
You didn't answer my question.
But I'm not sure what else I can say.
Do you know that industrial wind turbines are not recognized as an agricultural use and are not protected at the state level by the Farm Noise Nuisance Act?
I do not know that.
Do you know that in matters of zoning, industrial wind turbines are not a permitted principal use in any zoning district, including agricultural, and they are only permitted in an agricultural area as a conditional special use?
I'm aware of that.
Do you understand it is because of the number and scope of the impacts that they are restricted to a conditional special use?
I don't know why they're limited to that. I don't know why.
Do you know any of the factors that influence the amount and intensity of shadow flicker caused by the spinning blades? A turbine, such as is proposed for use at Green River Wind Farm?
No.
Do you agree that these might be issues that would concern a potential buyer?
I indicated that there were issues in my analysis.
As an appraiser, could you give a valid appraisal without knowing the measure of impact on a given parcel?
As an appraiser, we would make note of it on our appraisal report, consider it in our analysis, and certainly use comparable sales that were subject to the same influences.
What sort of other industrial uses have a negative impact on residential properties?
I imagine there are many kinds of industrial uses that could have.
Do you believe there's a reason why that they do not zone industrial uses next to residential uses?
Obviously, for natural order of growth within communities.
I believe you mentioned that you had knowledge of some of the real estate issues related to the DeKalb County, Illinois. Is that correct?
I'm familiar with some of them, yes.
You said that you visited a number of homes in and around the wind farms.
That's correct.
Are those been recent visits?
The most recent was probably 6 months ago.
You said you were familiar with the Appraisal One Group study of Wisconsin. Are you also aware of the issues in Brown, Fond du Lac, and Dodge counties of Wisconsin?
Not specifically.
Are you aware that there are incidents in which wind developers have been forced to purchase residential properties because there was no reasonable way to mitigate the negative impacts on the families who live there?
I know of no specific instance of that.
Do you know that the stated purpose of zoning and the responsibility of the Zoning Board of Appeals is not first and foremost to seek out the best use of the land, but to protect the health, safety, and well-being of the county citizens and to conserve property values?
I believe that's the case, yes.
Would you agree that the question that surrounding neighbors really want to know is not if, but how much property value will I sustain by having an industrial wind turbine near my home?
He's not in a position to answer that question.
Does your study in any way serve as a guarantee that anyone's individual property will not lose value as a result of the integration of wind turbines into the surrounding neighborhood?
My study indicates what historically has been the case. Neither I nor anyone I know can guarantee what will happen in the future.
Is there any reason why you used the demographic information from the Census Bureau from the year 2000 rather than the 2010 census?
I believe it perhaps was not completely available to me at the time.
I believe I have no further questions.
Thank you, Mr. Lovett. I need help with this name. I think it might be Jason Wayne or Ware, but I'm not sure. It begins with a J. I think the next letter is an A and then an S, and then I'm not sure. It looks like Wayne or Ware. Nobody? Stephen Robery. That's Stephen with a V, R-O-B-E-R-Y.
Good evening, Mr. Crowley. Good evening.
How many real estate transactions did you review as part of your analysis?
That was not within the scope of my analysis.
So none?
None.
Do you know if the appraisers and the real estate assessors reviewed any specific real estate transactions?
My questions to them included, were they aware of any situations in which property values were diminished? I did not ask them about specific transactions.
Did they provide any data regarding the number of transactions, the distance to the turbines, or the view of the turbines?
No.
So your analysis isn't based on actual sales data?
That's correct. It's not that kind of analysis.
Did any of the appraisers that you interviewed provide you with actual appraisals of properties on the market near wind farms?
No, nor were they solicited by me.
And you reviewed tax assessors. What was the purpose again for reviewing tax assessors?
One of the reasons why I include the assessment information in my analysis is that it is often mentioned that the completion of a wind farm will have a negative effect on the assessed valuations of surrounding properties. So my question was very specific to the assessors in that had they experienced any situation in which anyone applied for or anyone received a lowering of assessment because of the proximity of wind turbines.
So one of the factors in determining your opinion was that the assessors did not report any lower assessed values of properties, correct?
They did not indicate that they had lowered the assessed value, that's correct.
So if we look at an example, and let's say there's a house that 3 years ago sold for $100,000, and the same year the house was assessed by the tax assessor. Now, 3 years later, the house is reassessed and the assessed value does not change. Does that guarantee that the house will sell for at least $100,000?
No, certainly not.
So if the assessed value stays the same, it doesn't guarantee that the sales price stays the same, does it?
That's correct.
I think you testified last time that you did not conduct what you would call an appraisal. Your analysis was not an appraisal?
That's correct.
So you did not conduct appraisals of any individual properties near the Green River Wind Farm?
That's correct. That was not within the scope of my assignment.
Do you recall when Mr. Porter was cross-examining you that he asked you of your opinion of the highest and best use of a particular property, namely the Gertis property, Friesland Farms?
He asked me a number of questions. That may have been one of them.
Okay, I believe that you responded that you could not develop an opinion of the highest and best use of that particular property, and in order to do so, you would have to do an appraisal of the property in order to determine the highest best use. Do you recall that, or would you say that's the case?
When we're dealing with specific properties, the only way to determine many of its characteristics, is to actually conduct an appraisal of it.
So you couldn't determine the highest and best use without an appraisal of a particular property?
I can determine the highest and best use, but not to the extent that it would affect the appraisal process.
Would it be true that if you did not do an appraisal, of that property, the Friesman Farms property, you could not assess its value, make a value determination?
Without doing an appraisal, that's correct, I could not determine its value.
So how is it that you cannot determine a property's value without doing an appraisal, but you can develop an opinion as to the effect on wind turbines on the value of a particular property without doing an appraisal?
Because my research in these 4 states that I mentioned earlier indicated no evidence that has ever occurred anywhere else.
I believe you testified last time around, I don't think it came up today, that you had read the 2011 study conducted by Clarkson University that reviewed data on 11,000 property transactions over 9 years in northern New York State. And that this study found nearby wind turbines, properties near wind turbines significantly reduced property values. Have you read that report?
I've not studied it in detail. I've read through it, and I noticed that the nearest turbines in that study were 1/10 of a mile away. And I think that's far closer than any of the turbines that we're dealing with here.
So would you agree with the conclusion in that report that said for homes within 1/10 of a mile, they could be reduced as much as 40%? You would not?
I don't have enough information to agree or disagree with that.
And so if you had information, would you change your opinion on whether wind turbines could affect?
If there was a house within 520 feet of a tower, I would have to look at it closely.
The report also indicated that the value was reduced between approximately 8 and 15% for those properties 1 mile away. Would you agree with that?
No, I would not.
So you don't agree with this analysis in general?
Well, perhaps I shouldn't say I don't agree with it. I'm concerned primarily with studies that are done in Illinois, and even more specifically those that cover Lee County. I'm not familiar with the New York market. It was not among the states that I studied in my analysis.
You said earlier tonight that you were familiar with the Appraisal One Group report in Wisconsin that also indicated that there was a significant effect on property values from nearby wind turbines.
I'm familiar with that report, yes.
And you don't agree with that report?
I do not.
And I can't remember if this came up at the last meeting or not, but are you familiar with the report from Gardner Appraisal Group regarding the impact of wind turbines on rural Texas land, finding an average reduction of 25% for properties within 0.2 to 0.4 miles of the nearest turbine? Are you familiar with that report?
I'm not familiar with it at all.
Would you agree with the findings that I just stated?
I cannot say without actually looking at the report.
If you read the report and decided you agree with that, would that contradict your findings?
I don't know.
If a property had a 25% value reduction, being because of it was 0.2 to 0.4 miles from a nearest turbine, wouldn't that disagree with what you've testified to so far?
Other analyses may come to different conclusions. I base my conclusions on the information that I dealt with.
And then just one final report. I don't remember if you said you were familiar with the report by real estate expert Chris Luxemburger called Living Within the Impact of Wind Turbines that included analysis of 60 sales transactions. Were you familiar with that?
I'm not familiar with that.
I'm sorry, it was 600 sales transactions. You're not
I'm not familiar.
So you wouldn't have an opinion on the results of that study?
No opinion.
So if it indicated that the average sale price was reduced by $48,000 inside the windmill zone as compared to those outside, and the time on the market was doubled, and the percentage of unsold properties increased from 3% outside to 11% inside, you wouldn't have, that wouldn't change your opinion?
I have no knowledge of that report.
So your conclusions were reached by getting information from other real estate appraisers, but you didn't include information from such sources that I cited.
No, I interviewed real estate appraisers and real estate assessors who are active in the markets in which wind farms currently exist in the 4 Midwestern states that I indicated.
Wouldn't the fact that wind turbines have been found to impact property values in other areas of the country be relevant to your analysis?
Not to my analysis, that would be beyond the scope of it.
Also,
My analysis was based on interviews with the real estate appraisers and real estate assessors within the areas in which wind farms currently exist in the 4 upper Mississippi Valley states that I mentioned.
you mentioned earlier that you cited the Berkeley Labs report from 2009 within your report, correct?
I indicated it at the end of my report, yes.
And I believe that you called it one of the most comprehensive studies relating the effect of wind turbines to property values.
Yes, at the time that it was issued, it certainly was.
And are you aware that this was prepared for the Office of Energy Efficiency? Are you aware that it was prepared for the Office of Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy, specifically the Wind and Hydropower Technology Program of the U.S. Department of Energy?
I'm aware that it was developed for the Department of Energy.
And you also cited a publication in your report titled The Effect of Wind Development on Local Property Values, done in May of 2002 by the Renewable Energy Project Policy.
Yes.
And then it came up earlier that you also cited 2 reports from students of Dr. David Loomis at Illinois State University. One is by Jennifer Hinman in May of 2010. Is that cited in your report?
It is indicated at the end of my report, yes.
And then the second one was a 2011 report by Jason Carter.
Same basis, yes.
And they're both, are you aware that they're both students of Dr. Loomis at Illinois State University?
Yes, I'm aware.
And you're aware that he's the director of the Center of Renewable Energy in Illinois and is a member of the Illinois Wind Working Group?
I'm not familiar with his memberships. I know he's a professor at Illinois State University.
So isn't it true that all the studies that you cited in your report were somehow affiliated with the wind industry or wind energy advocacy groups? And you did not cite reports by others not affiliated with the wind industry that came to different conclusions that wind turbines do affect property values?
That's correct. I included the 3 reports that you mentioned at the end of my analysis to indicate that their results were consistent with mine.
And you agree that they were all prepared or somehow affiliated with wind industry or the wind energy advocacy groups?
Well, 2 of the 3 were developed by students of a professor at Illinois State University. His other actions and activities, I'm not familiar with all of his memberships.
You don't think his other affiliations might affect the grade that the students get on the report?
I don't know.
I'd like to take a closer look at the Berkeley Labs report, since that one was cited as one of the most comprehensive studies in your analysis, and that is true, right?
That's correct.
Are you aware that the report included an analysis of approximately 7,500 real estate transactions within 10 miles of, I believe, 11 different wind farms, and also included 412 sales near wind farms in Lee County?
That's correct.
And do you agree with the findings of that report?
I agree with their findings, yes.
And how would you summarize the findings of that report?
Their findings were that they could not identify any specific determining factor that would indicate that wind farm development adversely affected surrounding property values.
Are you aware that in this study, Mr. Hone evaluated such things as the severity of view, categorizing it, that is the view of turbines, categorizing it as none, minor, moderate, severe, and extreme?
I'm familiar with his report. I'm not at liberty at this point to either defend it or not. I'm familiar with it in general. The specific terms of his comparisons, I looked at them, but I don't recall them offhand.
Okay, but do you recall that he did evaluate and categorize the view of the turbines?
Certainly, the view of the turbines was one of the factors that he considered, yes.
And are you aware that he also looked at the distance to the nearest turbine?
I'm aware of that as well.
And are you specifically aware that he tabulated those as within a half a mile, within a mile, within 1 to 3 miles, within 3 to 5 miles, or 5 miles or greater?
The specifics escape me. You're saying that is correct.
And your analysis did not look at these characteristics?
The scope of my analysis did not include that.
And you said that you agreed with the findings of this report?
Well, I said that his results agreed with mine. Yes, that's correct.
If you were to find out that 85% of the homes in his report had no view of the turbines, and 97% had either no view or a minor view, with the minor view being defined as a view from a good distance away in terms of miles, and that 97.5% were further than a mile from the nearest turbine, would you still agree with the findings of the report?
His findings agree with mine. The situation when we're dealing with properties that sell or are listed within proximity of wind farms has to be considered on the basis of what percentage of the area in general the wind farm projects present. And it would be natural to assume that if one is measuring the number of sales of properties within a mile or 2 miles or 5 miles of any site compared with properties away from that radius, one will certainly find a substantially greater number of properties existing away from that radius than within it.
You're aware that Lee County was included in this study?
I'm aware of that.
Given the fact that 98% of the homes were greater than a mile from the turbine and 59% were over 3 miles away, what does the report tell you from a property value standpoint regarding the view of a home located 1/4 to 3/4 of a mile from several turbines?
What that tells me, as I mentioned earlier, is that if one draws a radius around a given site, you're going to find a lot more sales outside of that area than are within that area, simply because of the number of properties involved.
But how does the report, where virtually all the homes are further than a mile from the nearest wind turbine, say anything about what the property value impact is for a home that is located within a much shorter distance, 1/4 of a mile to a mile, of several turbines?
He concluded that it had no effect.
So with the same logic, you could determine the value of a lakefront beach house by looking at the sales for homes from that are located 5 miles from a lake?
If one were to only study properties within a given radius of a site, called Site A, comparing those properties to all those without of that area, the information might be helpful only if you're making comparisons that go beyond just the selling price of those houses. In his analysis, his hedonic regression analysis, he accounts for those differences.
If you're doing an appraisal of a property that is located 5 miles away from a lake, beachfront lake house, can you determine the value of a beachfront lake house?
If I'm doing an appraisal, I'm doing things substantially different from when I'm doing a consulting assignment. The Uniform Standards of Professional Appraisal Practice has specific sections, one of which, standards 1 and 2, deals specifically with the appraisal process and what we as appraisers have to do within that foundation. Standards 4 and 5 refer to consulting assignments. My analysis was based on standards 4 and 5. It's a consulting analysis, not an appraisal. If I were doing an appraisal of a house near a lake, I would only use comparables that were similar to that. But this is not an appraisal.
But you would agree that we're trying to determine if the presence of industrial scale wind turbines affects properties located as close as a quarter of a mile or whatever the setback happens to be. That's what we're trying to determine.
That's correct.
So you've done this a lot, and as an expert, what would you say was a better characterization of the information we all want to know? A, do wind turbines affect the values of homes located 3 to 5 miles away with little or no view of the turbines? Or would we really want to know, do wind turbines affect the value of property with wind turbines located as close as 1,750 feet? Which is the more appropriate question here?
I think they're both applicable.
So you're indeed testifying that you do not think that a home's value would be impacted based on having, let's just say, 3 or 4 500-foot turbines within 1/4 to 3/4 of a mile, and perhaps views of many other turbines in the distance, let's say 53 of them, at greater distances in all directions of property.
My analysis indicates that the areas that I studied have no indication that that would happen, that there would be a negative effect on value.
Even with a view of that many turbines that close?
We did not specifically look at numbers, but properties within the footprint of a wind farm, I'm assuming it would have the use of more than one turbine.
In your report, you used several different criteria. One of them is the C criteria on page 43. If you don't think that looking out onto 10, 20, 30, 40, 53 wind turbines at various distances as close to a quarter or a half mile away affects value of a property, what is an example of something that you could see that would affect the value of the property?
My analysis was strictly what is indicated in my report. I did not look for any other kinds of sources of potential value change.
I guess I'm looking to see what your see it criteria is. You're saying if you can see it, it can affect the value. What's something, an example of something you can see that affects the value of the property?
Well, certainly the wind turbines have a potential of affecting the value of the property. You can certainly see them, as I indicated in my report. However, I also indicated in my report that the experience of these other real estate professionals in areas where such turbines exist is that it has not adversely affected property values therein.
But you just said that they could have the potential to affect property values.
A lot of things have the potential to affect property values, not necessarily negatively. Other factors could affect values positively.
Can you describe what you said in your report under that seated criteria about how you didn't think the wind turbines could affect the property value because they're uniform in nature? Could you go through that analysis?
One of the things that was brought up earlier in the evaluation process of wind farm developments was a comparison of the modern turbines, which are a single pole, if you will, compared to some of the earlier ones, which were on the 4-leg towers. I categorize them as erector set-looking towers. The modern wind generating facilities are on single pole towers, which are obviously a less objectionable view than one that would be of the old type.
Do you have access to your report?
I do.
Can you look at page 44?
Okay.
And can you read the second full paragraph on that page, starting with uniformity?
Uniformity of appearance is an important factor. According to a Cal Poly study of wind farm designs, positive reactions to wind farm projects were greatly enhanced by a uniformity with respect to design, rotational direction and speed, color, height, rotor diameter among turbines in their array.
And I'm sorry, I should have had you read the paragraph before. Could you read the first paragraph as well?
The one that begins with while the issue.
Yes, please.
While the issue of positive or negative reaction to the appearance of wind generator towers, like beauty, is in the eye of the beholder, a number of factors relating to the proposed Green River Wind Farm project should be noted. One, each of the towers will be uniform in size, conical in shape, and of a matte off-white color. Each of the wind turbine generators will be identical in size, shape, and color. And three, the individual towers will be placed in a non-uniform pattern upon the landscape, thereby avoiding some of the straight-line appearance of some older wind farms.
And what's the purpose of that paragraph?
That's just to indicate the difference between modern wind farm towers and those of a previous generation.
And what are you trying to say with that paragraph then?
I'm trying to say that the modern wind farm development is not as noticeable on the landscape or as objectionable, if you will, as some of the older ones which use different types of towers.
Can you go ahead and read the last two paragraphs of that?
You have my report.
There you go.
I'm sorry, which?
The last two paragraphs of that section.
The design of the proposed towers, uniformity of color, the consistency of design, and all other design components of the Green River Wind Farm project appear to meet all of the design and aesthetic requirements of the various studies relating to greater acceptance. Therefore, while the turbines on the subject sites will be visible, they will be designed and sited in such a way as to eliminate the most objectionable factors.
So if we had a house in the mountains of Colorado with a beautiful scenic vista of pine trees and aspens, and then there was a forest fire, and the house wasn't damaged, but all the land around it was, and the view is now of charred remains of trees, somewhat uniform in nature, would that have an effect on the value of that property?
That is outside of the scope of my analysis.
Is that the outside of the scope of your expertise?
It certainly is. I'm not that familiar with Colorado real estate.
As somebody with a professional appraiser's license, you would be able to comment on the scenic qualities of a home?
I'm not licensed in the state of Colorado.
If we weren't in Colorado, but we were in Illinois, would you be able to comment on that?
Comment on what?
The scenic quality, the effect that I just described, could that affect the value?
Well, first of all, I don't know mountains to that extent in Illinois, so I'm not sure how to answer that.
If the trees weren't on mountains and they just burned down on flat Illinois land, would that affect the value of the property?
It would depend on the circumstances.
On page 45, you have the smell it criteria. And you indicate because of the nature of the turbines to be installed on the subject site, no emissions of pollutions and odors are possible. Is that correct?
That's correct.
What about hydraulic oil in the nacelle? Are you aware of that?
I'm aware that there is hydraulic oil in the nacelle.
If it leaks, wouldn't that be a potential pollutant?
You mean one that you can smell?
Well, you said no emissions of pollutants or odors are possible. If it leaked, would that be an emission of pollutants?
It would indicate a problem with that tower that I'm sure would come to the attention of the wind farm operators very quickly.
Do you still say no emissions of pollutants are possible?
Under the category of smell, yes, that's correct.
Under the feel it criteria, is it all right if I read it so you don't have to?
Please do.
The relatively slow speed of the rotation of the turbines on the subject site is not likely to generate any measurable vibration, which might be perceptible at distances greater than the setback required by the county ordinance. Is that part of your report?
Yes.
Are you aware that one of the most common complaints among people living near wind turbines around the world is low-frequency noise or vibration that can penetrate buildings and can cause discomfort, nausea, or other health impacts in some people?
I'm aware of reports of that.
The first part of that sentence reads, the relatively slow speed of the rotation of the turbines, correct?
That's correct.
Based on a rotor diameter of 370 feet that you indicated on the first page of your report, and a turbine rotating at one rotation every 3 seconds, do you know how fast that tip is rotating?
In the area of 180 miles an hour, I believe.
Would you dispute over 250 miles an hour?
I would not dispute that. If that can be shown.
And this is a relatively slow speed relative to what?
Relative to the older turbines, which ones that we might be familiar with, that we saw years ago in the California deserts, where they were turning at a much greater revolutions per minute frequency.
But relative to creating vibrations, is there any connection there?
I'm not aware of any specific vibrations being created by towers with this kind of rotational speed.
So you don't have any actual knowledge or expertise regarding vibrations from turbines, do you?
I'm not aware of any instance that has been proven where it's been a factor.
Shadow flicker on page 46, you have a short discussion that indicates that these setback distances, coupled with tree and ground level flora cover, are considered primary factors in eliminating most of the shadow flicker effect. Is that from your report?
That's correct.
How would ground level flora eliminate shadow flicker?
Depending upon the height of trees or the mounting of dirt or something of that nature, it could block the shadow flicker in the early morning or late evening periods during which the sun is rising or sun is setting. At times when the most shadow flicker is likely to occur.
Can you explain how, say, well, the ground level, plants at ground level could block shadow flicker?
Well, what I was referring to here were taller than just small shrubs. But I use ground level to determine where the plants would be planted, which would be in the ground.
No. So you feel comfortable saying a 50-foot tree could eliminate shadow flicker coming from a 500-foot turbine?
Depending upon the exact measurements, I feel certain of that.
Have you seen videos of shadow flicker penetrating closed windows, closed blinds and curtains and windows?
I've seen information on the internet to which I give very little credence.
Why is that?
I give very little credence to most stuff I see on the internet.
The minutes of this meeting will be on the internet. Would you give credence to those?
I would have to read them to make sure.
So you think trees can eliminate shadow?
I think that there are ways to eliminate shadow.
Trees being one of them.
Trees being one.
Would moving turbines away from where people live be another way?
Obviously, certainly.
I believe during the Whiteside County hearings, you testified that a significant portion of the market would need to be affected in order for it to affect the market of homes near wind turbines.
That's correct.
And if I read a question, would you be able to, could I see if you would recall this particular question?
Go ahead.
Assume for a moment that people have no good reason to oppose wind turbines, but still they don't want to live anywhere near them. If they are the majority, what effect would they have on demand for houses near wind farms?
Are you asking what my answer to that was?
Let's follow that with a question.
Okay. Assume for the moment that people have no good reason to oppose wind turbines, but still they don't want to live anywhere near them. If they're the majority, what effect would that have on the demand for houses near wind farms?
I'm not aware of any circumstance where they are in the majority.
Did you testify in Whiteside County that your experience is that you have found that there is a sparsely distributed number of opponents?
I believe I said that, yes.
When you would say that in order to have an impact on a significant portion of the market, in order to have an impact, a significant portion of the market would have to object to wind turbines, and that you haven't found that anywhere, what data are you looking at?
I am simply looking at my own observations.
Do you have any information on regarding the percentage of the market that object to wind turbines?
I have not.
And when you say objecting to wind turbines, do you mean that they object to the idea of wind turbines, or do they object to living near wind turbines?
It could be either, I suppose.
Do you have any actual data regarding people's willingness or objection to live near wind turbines?
No.
So you wouldn't be able to say how many people out of 100 would want to willingly live near a wind farm, say, a quarter of a mile to a mile away from several turbines?
I have seen no studies of that.
That's all I have.
Thank you, sir. Jim Timble? Jim. Timble, T-I-M-B-O. That's my name.
Mr. Crowley, did you consider how 500-foot wind turbine heights, current 500-foot wind turbine heights, will affect landowners, given the unchanged 1,400-foot setback that is designed for 200-foot wind turbines? It was initially designed for 200-foot wind turbines.
I'm not sure I understand.
I couldn't understand that question.
Okay. Back 12 years ago now, the county established.
You're telling them things. You just can't tell them everything. Asking questions is hard. There's no question about it, so to speak.
Okay. Did you study as part of your effort to quote you, to determine the effect of this development on other properties in the area? Did you study the effect that wind turbines 500 foot tall, 1,400 feet away from a home would have, as opposed to wind turbines only 200 feet tall, 1,400 feet away from a home?
My study did not, that was not within the scope of my analysis.
Okay, but wouldn't a factor like that assist you or anybody in determining the effect, unquote, effect of this development on other properties in the area?
To clarify, perhaps, my analysis involved a survey of other appraisers and assessors in areas where wind farms currently exist, some rather small in size, some rather large in size. I found no differentiation in the professionals that I talked with as to whether or not the size of the turbines had any effect on values. In each case that I talked about, each case I investigated, they indicated that there was no adverse effect.
In other words, you didn't bring it up, and they didn't bring it up either.
The specific size of the towers?
Yes.
No, that's correct.
In the first paragraph, page 2 of your letter, you mentioned one mobile home site. Is that a developed site with mobile homes on it, or is it just a site that mobile homes might be built someday?
It was a mobile home existing on a parcel in the country.
One single mobile home.
One single
correct?
mobile home.
In the second paragraph on that page, and I quote you, the only use among the above potential uses which fits all of these criteria is the continuation of the present agricultural land use, both before and after the completion of the proposed wind farm. Would you say that, would you agree that wind farms erode the agricultural misuse because, number one, they take land out of agriculture?
Well, they take a very small portion of the land out of agriculture. Each turbine and road going to it, in most cases, is less than an acre, and in some cases less than 3/4 of an acre. The remaining land is still available for agricultural production.
Correct. So you're saying 3/4 of an acre to an acre, counting the roads, is that correct?
That's correct.
Follow-up question to the lady's question earlier. How did you pick the houses that you actually went into to visit the owners?
In the houses that I did visit, it was by random, usually for purposes other than the development of the wind farm project.
Oh, okay. Were you looking, then you were not looking for homes that are very close to wind turbines to visit?
Not as part of this analysis.
Well, again, I go back to your second purpose, to determine the effect of this development on other properties in the area. Wouldn't it make sense to talk to homeowners who are living close, very close to turbines, since most of the complaints come from there?
That wasn't the type of analysis I was doing. Mine was strictly a survey analysis in which I selected professional real estate appraisers and township and county assessors.
Did you interview property owners in the Ohio, Illinois area?
I did not interview property owners.
And then, again, as a follow-up, going back to DeKalb, not to the lawsuit, but let's go back to DeKalb before the lawsuit, and when the wind turbines were built and in effect for a year or more. Were you aware that there was a vociferous, very many people, number of complaints about problems from those wind turbines?
I'm not aware of that.
You were never aware of it?
I was not.
In a second from the last paragraph on page 2 of your letter, and I quote, interviews with various residents near existing wind farms in Illinois and Wisconsin provided a significant level of support for the facility with few negative comments. What was the nature of the negative comments you received in that instance?
Well, the most common one I found in my initial analysis was interference with television reception. I did, of course, find some objection to the noise factor. I found some objection to shadow flicker.
You found no comments about feeling ill from them?
I found none of that.
In that instance?
None of that.
You speak of an additional in-depth interview with Lincoln Township Assessor in Kewaunee County, Wisconsin. And you further say that the assessor provided some statistical data which indicates that the existence of the wind farm in that market has not lowered any assessments and has not negatively affected property values. When you made that visit, did you pass by or stop in the little town of Denmark, Wisconsin?
I don't recall that I passed through that town.
So you don't recall the name of that town?
I don't recall it.
Just prefacing my next question, Denmark, Wisconsin is right on the border of, it's in Brown County.
Things again.
I'm sorry about that. Sorry about that. Let's do this. Your Honor, it's okay to give an exhibit about that area.
As I indicated in my opening remarks that I made today and in two previous sessions, exhibits are, under the board's rules, with 8 copies, are being considered. If they're not 8 copies, then they're not. That's the board's rules.
And one of the 8 copies goes to Mr. Crowley?
No.
Eight copies.
8 copies.
8 copies plus? Will do. Exhibit 13?
I'll just let the numbers, you just hand me the, there's 8 copies there.
Yes, sir.
I don't know what you handed Mr. Crowley, but why don't you take Mr. Crowley's back? Mr. Porter, Mr. Timble's just handed me 8 copies of the stapled document, quotation law. I'm marking them all 13. One goes to the applicant. One to you, Mr. Porter. John, you get 5. Okay, Mr. Timble, you may continue.
Okay. Mr. Crowley, I will read you 3 short paragraphs from this exhibit, and then I will ask a question. David Enns and his wife Rose, a year ago, the couple abandoned their home near Denmark, Wisconsin, because of the unbearable low-frequency noise produced by a half dozen 490-foot-high wind turbines.
Can you just help me out? What page are you on?
The second paragraph, very first page, Your Honor.
Okay, thank you.
A half dozen 490-foot-high wind turbines that were built near their home that they've owned since 1978. The closest was installed 3,200 feet from their house. Mr. Crowley, are you familiar with the Shirley Wind Project, which is right on the border of Kewaunee and Brown County?
I'm not by name, but I'm familiar with the area.
Shirley Wind Project's turbines began operating, when they began operating, a couple of began experiencing numerous symptoms, including headaches, ear pain, nausea, blurred vision, anxiety, memory loss, etc., etc. Said Mr. Enns, age 68. Today, the Enses are living in their RV or staying with friends. Republican State Senator Frank Blasey, whose district includes the Enses' 41-acre property, last October filed legislation that would require the state to investigate the health effects of the noise produced by the industrial wind turbines. My question, my second question to you on this, Mr. Crowley, as an assessor, do you believe that the experience that the Enns family is having will negatively affect the value of their home?
Once again, I'm not an assessor, and I don't know enough about the circumstance to have an opinion one way or another.
So let me ask you, if just from a perspective of common sense, would you think that this couple would have a hard time selling their home, given the circumstances?
I don't know the circumstances.
Did I not just read you the circumstances, sir?
I don't know the source of that information, nor do I know that the source of their medical problems is, in fact, due to the wind turbine.
Okay. On the third page of your letter, first paragraph. And I quote, Therefore, I have concluded that the proposed use of the subject property would not likely result in any factors which might have a negative effect on any of the existing land uses in the area, and would not precipitate any circumstances in which real estate market values or assessment levels, etc., might be jeopardized. Please define not likely on a scale of 1 to 10, if you would, please.
I don't know how to answer that. If it's not likely, it's not likely.
So you don't, in your process, you do not declare degrees of not likely.
I do not indicate degrees of not likely. Not likely seems to me to indicate it's not likely.
If something is termed not likely, does it also infer that there is a possibility of likeliness?
It infers that there is a possibility of likeliness, yes.
Thank you. On page 24 of your report, you refer it's back. You refer to a circle on page 23. And then on page 24, you relate that circle to the latest census, the 2010 census information. And under the category of 2010 households, you show 4 households in a 1-mile radius, and you show 65 households in a 3-mile radius. My question is, are you simply stating that 4 households are in the bullseye / 1-mile epicenter of the project? Or are you implying that none of the remaining 68 households will be within 1 mile of any of the 57 turbines?
No, I'm simply identifying that as the focus is the center of the wind farm development. And the 3 radii emanating from that are 1 mile, 3 miles, and 5 miles, and the population density and all the other demographic information is shown within those 3 radii.
Okay, so just to make sure that I'm clear in my mind, it is not saying that there are only 4 households that may be within 1 mile of a wind turbine.
No, it does not say that at all.
Okay, thank you. On page 44 of your report, sir, you referred to it earlier, but let me read it again. On the consistency of towers, it said, all other design components of the Green River wind farm project appear to meet all the design and aesthetic requirements of the various studies relating to greater acceptance. None of those studies are referenced by name, unless I missed something in your report. Could you tell me the name of the most current and the most popular study?
In the paragraph previous to that, I quote Wind Turbines and the Landscape by Freudberg Nielsen. And before that, there was also a Cal Poly study. I don't have the specifics of it right here.
Okay, I'm sorry, I skipped right over that. In the next paragraph, you comment, therefore, while the turbines on the subject sites will be visible, they will be designed and sited in such a way as to eliminate the most objectionable factors. So, in essence, are you saying, i.e., there are objectionable factors that they cannot eliminate?
Certainly, I don't mean to indicate in any of my report that there will not be some factors of the wind farm development that some people might find objectionable. And that's very obvious when one looks around this room this evening. What I'm saying is whether or not some individuals find it objectionable does not necessarily indicate that it adversely affects property values.
The paragraph at the bottom of that page, 44, you state, in observations completed within the past few months in the Crescent Ridge and Mendota Hills project, sounds from the towers were completely obliterated by sounds of farm equipment in the fields and by traffic along the various roadways. When asked about earlier about noise in the evening, your comment was you were aware that wind velocity varies throughout the day. Are you aware also, I would think you would be, that noise from any wind turbine is going to be heard much more at night because the sounds during the day, the farming sounds, the traffic sounds, the sounds of daily activity are quieted down. Are you aware that, let me rephrase the question, wind turbines run at night. Most of daily activity, like farming, etc., does not run at night. Is that not a huge difference in terms of being able to judge the noise that wind turbines make?
That would certainly be a consideration, just as the fact that people would tend to be outside in the daytime much more frequently than they would be at nighttime hours. The ability to hear it would depend upon their location in relation to the turbine and their presence either within or without a residence.
And would it not also be related to whether or not they sleep with their windows open in the spring and summer?
That could certainly be a factor.
Did you, of the visits you made to homes, well, let me ask a question before that question. I'm not clear from how you answered earlier. I asked you if you chose the homes you visited. You said you did not. I asked you if you visited homes near wind turbines, and I was unsure of your answer. So my question is, in your study, in your analysis, did you visit homes at night near wind turbines?
I do not recall visiting any at night.
on page 45 under Field, you state, therefore, the completion of the proposed wind farm should not generate any vibrations or shock waves which might be felt on the surrounding properties. Did you investigate low-frequency vibration?
I did not. That was not within the scope of my analysis.
May I ask, if you're going to investigate vibrations, why would you not, to determine the effect of wind turbines on homeowners, why would you not look into both of the major types of vibrations, the ones that have some sound with them and the low frequency ones that don't, but are measurable vibration?
That was not within the scope of my analysis.
The last paragraph on that page, sir, you stated that a number of new residential properties have been constructed with or adjacent to wind farms in the region, including new residents constructed during the past year or so within the Camp Grove wind farm in Stark and Marshall counties in Illinois. First question related to that, can you name, identify any residential such construction built around wind farms in Lee County, Bureau County, DeKalb County?
I can identify at least one in Bureau County that was a residence that was constructed adjacent to the wind farm within about maybe 3/4 of a mile of the nearest tower by a woman who was a real estate broker in the Princeton area and was one of the original objectors to the wind farm. She and her husband subsequently built a house within 3/4 of a mile.
3/4 of a mile?
It's 2.5 to 3/4.
Going back to the Camp Grove wind farm, you said including new residents constructed during the past year or so. Can you tell me how many? You said a number of residents, but can you give me a ballpark figure? Can you give me a ballpark figure of how many we're talking about?
I'm aware of two.
And you said last year or so, you're talking 2012 or so, or 2011 or so into 2012?
Within the past year.
In the past year. In your analysis, you repeatedly stated that county assessors and appraisers in the counties you investigated did not have any reason to lower assessed valuations because of wind farm impacts and or to wind farm causing evaluations of property. In your analysis, did you come across any homeowner lawsuits for court actions to recover lower assessed values for the evaluation of a home property?
You mean if someone's suing the assessment office?
Do you have any knowledge that such lawsuits are in existence anywhere in the study area that you study?
I'm not aware of any.
Do you think it's possible that such lawsuits exist or are likely to occur?
In my many years in the appraisal process, I can't recall any instance where a taxpayer has sued the assessor for the purpose of getting their assessment lowered. It may have happened. I'm just not aware of any.
Jim, I'm just trying to pay attention to the time. If you got a question pending, let's try and... I want to push you, but it is approaching 9:30.
Yes. That exhibit tells the story of...
You're telling them things, Mr.
Oh, you're right. You're right, John. You're right. It is good.
Thank you.
If I gave you an exhibit, which I have done just now,
You haven't given him anything. You submitted an exhibit. I marked it 14 for each of the copy.
I said, hard to ask questions.
It is. It's hard to do that and not testify yourself. But the difference is you're not under oath. You're here to cross-examine a person who is.
Have you ever come across a legal case in Lincolnshire, England, in which a court found for a lady.
We're not going to go there, Mr. Chairman. We're just not going to go there. We're not even talking about the same country, much less the same jurisdiction. What court decided in England is completely irrelevant here.
Well, Your Honor.
No.
Okay.
No, not at all. We don't know if the laws are the same, we don't know if the rules are the same. Not to mention the fact Mr. Crowley certainly didn't base any of his opinions on data from foreign countries.
Mr. Crowley, at the last meeting, the subject, in fact, I believe it's Exhibit 11, which is the values in the wind. Study done by Heinzelman and Tutter came up. And the following questions relate to that study, because there will be questions. The questions are related to comparing that study with the Berkeley report. Are you aware that the values in the wind study is almost 2 years more current than the Berkeley study?
I'm not aware of that study.
You're not aware of the values in the wind study?
I'm not aware of it. I don't, unless you have something to show me that I might be maybe more.
I haven't found a way yet, but I'm trying to get copies of the...
All right, gentlemen, questions, answer questions. Please.
All right. Did not Mr. Porter, at the last meeting, ask you about the values in the wind study? And did you not answer that you were aware of it, but that it wasn't popular because it was done with a hedonic fashion?
I don't think I said that, because I certainly would agree that the hedonic method of real estate valuation certainly is a very effective and very efficient way to measure value, which was not part of my analysis, and not within the scope of my analysis.
Are you aware, well, you are not aware of the study at all then?
My recollection now is that it was not a study, it was an article written in the Real Estate Appraisal Journal. I believe that's what you're referring to, and I don't believe that was a study, it was simply an article written by an appraiser.
It is entitled Values in the Wind.
You're telling them things again, Mr.
If I asked you if the title of the study, which is Values in the Wind, a hedonic analysis of wind power facilities, is a study, or an article. Could you please differentiate for me as to which it is?
The Appraisal Journal is a publication by the Appraisal Institute, which allows practicing appraisers to submit various opinions and various articles about various parts of the real estate appraisal process. I don't recall the specifics of that property, but I believe what you're referring to was an article written for the Appraisal Journal. It was not an actual study.
If I told you that the study differs from the Berkeley study in that it covers three very large wind farm facilities compared to small ones in the Berkeley, and it covers, it is done in 3 contiguous New York counties as opposed to 24 regions. In the Berkeley study, would that surprise you or interest you?
First of all, are you talking about the Clarkson study?
The Clarkson study, yes.
I'm sorry, I misunderstood. I thought you called it something else.
Well, it's,
No, just
I did call it. Okay.
you have a question?
I don't agree with the conclusions as I indicated earlier.
Are you saying you don't agree with any of the conclusions of the values of the wind study that was done at Clarkson University?
I have not spent enough time looking through that study to really develop an opinion, but as a brief search of the results, I do not agree with the results.
The fact that we'll call it Clarkson study for brevity, conducted 11,369 arm's length real estate transactions over 9 years, compared to 7,500 by the Berkeley study. And the fact that they had 1,903 repeat sales parcels, which the Berkeley study had very few. Would not that be enough to pique your curiosity to look further at the study?
I don't have enough information about the study to really answer any questions other than to say I do not agree with the results.
The fact that the Clarkson study, which was done also on a hedonic basis, determined that there was significant losses of property values among the 11,369 properties, transactions, sales that they studied. 20.57% for properties within a quarter mile of wind farms, wind turbines, minus 17.77% within a half mile of wind turbines, minus 14.87% property value within 1 mile of wind turbines, minus 11.86% loss of property value within 2 miles of wind turbines, and a loss of 10.05% property values within 3 miles of turbines. Would those facts not raise your curiosity, given the fact that you're looking for the facts and that you're doing it with a non-bias.
That information, of course, was not and would not be considered in my analysis. Neither was the result of any of the studies that I indicated I reviewed after I had arrived at my conclusion. My conclusion was arrived at without reference to those studies. I reviewed those studies, of course, over time, but I only mentioned them in my report after I arrived at my conclusion based on the scope of my analysis that I indicated in my report.
Your report contains references only to studies, reports, papers that find no damage to properties in any fashion, property values in any fashion from wind turbines. Why wouldn't you cross-reference to ones that do, reports? It's an analysis, such as yours, and tell the people who read the report what the differences are and why the reports you did submit prevail.
Not only did the studies that I reference in my report agree with my conclusions, but they were also local. They involved properties in Illinois, and in one case, in at least two cases, properties here in Lee County. I would not feel that it would be of any impact to include a study from New York State, a market that I'm not familiar with, and would have no idea what the applicability would be for an application here in Lee County.
Is it not entirely possible that wind turbines being used in New York State at comparable distances to where they're being used in Illinois are the same brand and that it would be significant?
I do not know the market in Upper New York State.
Do you know that there are only so many models of wind turbines and the possibility that they're using different turbines than they use here in New York State should be nil?
I'm sorry, I don't understand the question.
If wind farms in New York State have to be, let me rephrase that. Given the small number of manufacturers of wind turbines, same wind turbines almost have to be used in New York State as they're being used in Illinois. And
That's a statement, Mr. Kinley.
it's a statement going to a question.
Okay.
Almost have to be used in Illinois at the same heights. Don't you think that that's an honest possibility?
Well, once again, I can see what you're saying, that they're the same turbines. What I'm saying is I know the market in Illinois. I don't know what effect they would have on the market in New York State. There are many other concerns than the types of turbines that would enter into the process of an analysis such as this. I did not interview any appraisers or assessors in New York State. I concentrated on those that I consider to be in areas somewhat similar to those that are here in Lee County.
Mr. Kimball, it's almost 20 now, 2:25 on the 20 of it. I don't want to cut you off, but can you give me a hint of how much longer, kind of decision whether to suggest to the chair to continue that or not?
Your Honor, I would say another 30 minutes.
Mr. Chair, I would suggest, up to you, if you move to continue the session till, I think, August 7th.
Judge, before we do that, we do have some exhibits we'd like to
think
It's on the
so.
7th.
7.
I entertain a motion to continue the hearing.
So moved.
Is there a second? Being all in favor, say aye.
These are all the same.
All the same. Motion carries. The next meeting will be Tuesday, August 7th at 7 p.m. for continuation of the